Hello bookworms! Today I'm going to be doing my February wrap-up video. Just so you know, there is construction going on outside, and I probably said this in other videos, but there is a chance that I might add some music in here so it's not as annoying for you to listen to. It is super annoying for me personally. Here we go, because I read a lot of books. The first thing that I read was Crazy Rich Asians by Kevin Kwan. This is so much fun. I really wanted to read it before seeing the film, so I picked it up this month and I can't wait to watch it. I ended up really loving this book. It follows a girl named Rachel and a guy named Nick, and they live together in New York and they've been dating for like 2 years, and then there is a wedding that's going on. So Nick invites Rachel to Singapore for the summer and go to this wedding and visit his family, and she's kind of nervous because it's like a big kind of step and she doesn't really know what to expect. Little does she know, Nick comes from serious money. His family is just loaded and they're all pretty crazy. They all have like their own sub-stories going on, so you do get a lot of different perspectives. There are some people in here that are just like the worst, and then there are other people that are just so entertaining and you're really rooting for them. Particularly, I really liked his female cousin Astrid, and I'm really looking forward to getting to book 2. I just thought that this was completely entertaining from beginning to end. It was another book that I've read this year that is kind of like an adult Gossip Girl, and the parents are trying to kind of sabotage their son's relationship, and the grandmother is like in charge of the family, and it's just so fun. And I also feel like I learned a lot of things about Chinese culture that I didn't know before. It also made me very hungry because they talk about food like constantly in this book. I really loved it. I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. Next, I read The Simple Wilds by K.A. Tucker. This one I had been really looking forward to because the main character actually travels to Alaska, like a very remote part of Alaska, in order to get to know her father before he passes away. She finds out in the beginning that he is ill, and she decides to take the trip there to meet him because she hasn't ever even seen him since she was like 2 years old or even younger. She is someone that comes from a city. She's super used to having certain luxuries, and she has to adjust as soon as she gets to Alaska because it is just like a completely different world there. I thought that this was a really accurate portrayal of Alaska. I really liked seeing her getting to know her father and her father's way of life. I thought it was super interesting. Like I said, as someone who has been to Alaska, I felt like it was very similar to my experience, but this is actually a new adult novel, and one of the things that I liked about it is that it is like a more mature story. It's not like focused on smut like a lot of new adult is. It's just like a good solid story, like a contemporary but for an older person. And the main character and her best friend actually like run a blog together, and so she's constantly talking about like having to post things, and her father owns an airline company in Alaska for like small charter planes, and it's just like I just found the whole thing to be so interesting, and I was definitely crying during points of this, but I truly loved it. It is definitely a new favorite, and this one I also gave 4.5 stars. Then CanterburyRoadCo started, and I did pretty well until like the last 2 days or 3 days where I like didn't really read at all because I was just very busy with other things. But the first book that I picked up was Fame, Fate, and the First Kiss by Casey West. This follows a girl who is in high school, but she has just gotten her big break, and she's getting to co-star in this zombie film alongside a very famous, very well-established actor. So she's really excited, but her dad is a bit on the overprotective side, and he keeps hiring all of these tutors for her because he wants to make sure that she's still keeping up with her schoolwork. And there's some different antics that happen on set, and an unlikely romance forms, and I have to say, did not care for this one. I was really upset because I have really enjoyed all of Casey West's books in the past. There have been a couple that I've been like, all right, this one isn't as good as some of her others, but it was still an enjoyable read, and like I knew what I was going into. This one, I was just like, this is bad. I don't know. I felt like the writing seemed really simplistic. I felt like the main character didn't really have much definition to her and didn't have too much going on. I always feel like there's a more dynamic story in addition to the romance in all of Casey's books, and I just didn't feel that way in this one. Every time that I went to pick it up, I was like complaining about reading it, and Andrew was like, why don't you just stop reading that book? And I was like, you know what? If it was any other author, I would have already DNF'd this book, but because it's Casey West and because I've liked all of her other books, I feel like I need to give it that fair chance to like get to the ending. And the ending was very cute, but it just didn't redeem the rest of the story for me. I didn't find this to be a pleasurable experience like at all, and I ended up giving this one 2 stars. Then I read Giant D's Volume 2 by John Allison. This comic series follows 3 girls who are roommates in college, and it just tells about like different experiences that they have. It's not like a cohesive overarching story. So each volume is kind of like an anthology where it has some issues that are not necessarily intertwined with one another, and it just tells like kind of snapshots of their life, so it's kind of like a slice of life comic. I really enjoyed the first volume very much. The second one I thought was okay. I think it was missing a little bit of what I really liked in the first one. It's hard to put my finger around exactly what it was. I just didn't feel the same way about it as I was reading it. I still enjoyed it, but I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would, and I ended up giving this one 3 stars. Then I read Always Never Yours by Emily Wibberley and Austin Sigmund Broca, and the 2 of them are actually married, and this was so good. Like, I was so into it. It follows a girl named Megan, and she is in her high school theater program, and she really wants to go into like directing, but in order to get accepted into the school that she is applying for, she needs to have at least 1 acting credit. Her school is putting on a production of Romeo and Juliet, and she auditions to have the smallest role within the play because she just wants to get that credit done so that she can apply and whatever. But she ends up being cast as Juliet. She's not really happy about it. I truly enjoyed this one. There were so many references to Shakespeare, and this town is really known for like Shakespeare, so even the pizza place is Shakespeare themed, and like everything about it was just so much fun and so cute. And I thought that these characters were so believable. Like, they were really very real people to me. I really liked the romance in it. I thought it was like the cutest, sweetest thing in the world, and I was really rooting for her and this other character to get together. I really appreciated the friendship in it. I just loved everything about it. Megan is kind of a character that I think a lot of people would say is an unlikable character, which I hate using that term, but that is essentially like how she's written. But I loved her. I thought it was so great to see such a different kind of character that totally exists in our world have her own story, and it was really compelling, and she had a lot going on too with like family stuff, and it was just so well written, so well done. I cannot even tell you how excited I am to read their next book, which is coming out, I can't remember if it's March or April, but I just got a copy of it and I can't wait. Like, I'm picking that up ASAP. In case you can't tell, I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. Then I read Radio Silence by Alice Oseman, which is one that everyone has been telling me to read for so very long, and it wasn't until I saw Jane from It's Jane Lindsay just like rave and rave and rave about Alice Oseman that I went out and I picked up these beautiful UK paperbacks of them. Let me tell you, while I was reading, it was super stressful to not break the spine, because even like the tiniest motion, I would be like, oh no, it's bending. So I was kind of reading like this, but I loved it so much. This was such a beautiful story. It follows a girl, and she is obsessed with this podcast, and she's also like a super straight A student. She kind of hides the fact that she's into like fandom and different kinds of things from everyone that she goes to school with, and her friend group isn't really like a true friend group. They don't really know too much about the real her. So at the beginning of the book, she gets an email from the person who created her favorite podcast. The podcast is essentially like Welcome to Night Vale. The creator says that they really enjoy her artwork and wanted to see if she would be willing to create like an animation for each of the podcast episodes, but understand that they can't pay. It's not something that they make money on, blah, blah, blah. So she ends up finding out who that person is in real life, and the 2 of them become really good friends, and it's just so beautifully done. Like, they're both able to be so open and honest with one another. Also, this book is extremely diverse, which is wonderful. It's just such a positive portrayal of teenagers, and I loved it. Also cried during this book, and this was one of the few true 5-star reads that I have had this year, and I can't wait to read everything else by Alice Oseman. So good. And then my final read of Contemporary-thon was The Deal by Elle Kennedy. So I read a total of 5 books during Contemporary-thon, which is pretty good. But like I said, didn't really read too much the last like 2 days, so I'm very proud of myself for what I did accomplish. I've been wanting to read this series forever, and I am so glad that I really enjoyed this book. I'm definitely continuing on with this series. It follows a girl in college, and she is like super smart, and she is one of the only people in her class that passed this midterm. And then there's another character named Garrett, and he is a hockey player, and there's a lot more to him than meets the eye, but he did not do so well on that midterm, and he's not going to be able to play in his hockey games unless he is passing the class. He spends a good amount of time trying to convince Hannah to tutor him. She's like kind of hell-bent against it, doesn't want to have anything to do with him, but he ends up convincing her, and then the two of them get closer, and there's romance, and it's so cute. The one thing that I will say is that it is very hard for me to get past jock lingo. So initially I was like, I hate this guy. Like, I just would never talk to someone like this in real life. But like I said, there's a lot more to him than meets the eye, and I'm really glad that I like powered through that initial hesitancy and got to know him better. I think it's actually said in one of the first few chapters, but Hannah was raped when she was in high school, so she is very guarded when it comes to men and when it comes to relationships. But I thought that it handled everything very well. I really enjoyed the story, and I also really loved the friendship between Hannah and her best friend Allie. So amazing, like such a positive portrayal of female friendship. It just made me so happy. And I believe that Allie is one of the main characters in one of the later books in this series, so I cannot wait to read that one. I ended up giving the deal 4 stars. Next, I read This Lullaby by Sarah Dessen. This was also kind of coming off Contemporary-thon. It was one that I really wanted to finish, but I didn't get to during the week, so I decided to just pick it up next. Sadly, I didn't like this one. I feel like Sarah Dessen's books are so hit or miss for me. 9 times out of 10 they're miss. I still want to read everything that she has written, but I just really I was so bored reading this, and it's not even that long, so I thought it was going to be a quick read, but it took me so much longer because I just didn't care about what was going on. It follows a girl whose mom is a romance author, and her mom has been married so many times. So our main character, Remy, is very against the idea of love. She likes those initial few weeks when she first starts dating someone, but then she inevitably finds things that bother her about them and breaks up with them very quickly. And in the beginning of the book, she meets this guy at a car dealership, and he comes over to her because he's like, I just felt something between us, and then he's pursuing her for a good amount of time before she gives him the time of day. Their romance was cute, and I did like her progression of feelings, but I was really bored. I was just not into the story, and it wasn't striking a chord with me, so I ended up giving this one 2 stars. Then I read Dark Disciple by Christy Golden, and this is a Star Wars novel following Asajj Ventress, who you will know if you've watched the Clone Wars, as well as Voss Quinlan, who is also a Clone Wars character in a couple episodes here and there. But I loved this book. I was not expecting to love it as much as I did, but it was so awesome. So basically what happens is the Jedi decide that they need to assassinate Count Dooku because he is really responsible for all of the war that is happening between the separatists and the Republic. So they're like, we need to kill him. So Obi-Wan is like, I think I know a guy, and he suggests Voss Quinlan, and he's like, but he needs to team up with Ventress because Ventress was Count Dooku's apprentice, so she knows a lot about him. She's tried to kill him in the past, but she's never been able to be successful. But also Voss has to kind of trick Ventress into teaming up with him because Ventress is like a lone wolf, and she's so badass. I love her to pieces. So the two of them end up teaming up together to try to kill Count Dooku, and there is just like so much that goes on, and this ended up being like a beautiful love story, which I was not expecting by any means. I truly enjoyed this. It was so satisfying to see what happened to Ventress's character after Clone Wars. There were some loose ends there, and I just feel like everything was tied up so nicely and in such a great way for anyone who is a fan, and I cannot wait to read more of Christy Golden's Star Wars books. I just got her other one, which I think is like Battlefront 2. Loved this one, and I ended up giving this one 4.5 stars. Then I read Darth Maul, Son of Dathomir, and this is another one that I really enjoyed. This is a comic. Typically with the Star Wars comics, I haven't found too many of them that I've really enjoyed. I've been buying all of them digitally on comic comicsology, but this is the first one that I ever read and then felt compelled to buy a physical copy of as well. It is somewhere in my book haul pile, but I can't find it right now. I really loved it. So it follows Darth Maul and he gets into a situation with Count Dooku. It also takes us back to Dathomir. We don't see the Night Sisters, but we see Mother, what's her name? Mother Talzin. We also see General Grievous, and it's just so good. It touched upon some of my favorite episodes ever, which take place on Dathomir, and I really loved it. I gave this one 4 stars. Then I read C-3PO The Phantom Limb, and this was a one-shot comic that explained why C-3PO has a red arm in The Force Awakens. It was a fun one-shot. I did enjoy it. C-3PO is my favorite droid, much to Andrew's dismay, but I really love him, and I thought that it was a really good way of getting a more emotional side from a droid, which is funny because they're machinery, but like they clearly do have some type of feelings. I thought it was a really good explanation. It was really fun, and it was just like a quick thing, so I ended up giving this one 3 stars. Then I read The Last Jedi Storms of Crete, which is another one-shot. This takes place on Crete, which you see in The Last Jedi, but this takes place years prior, right after episode 4. Leia, Han, and Luke go to Crete to see if it could possibly be a base for the rebels to like set up. It was really fun. I really enjoyed it. I especially love the Han Solo parts. It was great. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. And lastly, I read Bloodline by Claudia Gray. This is the Star Wars novel that follows Leia as an adult, and I really enjoyed this one. It is very heavily focused in the politics. I touched upon this in my Currently video. I didn't love this one as much as I love Dark Disciple, but I did really enjoy it, and this one takes place like right before The Force Awakens, so it's everything that Leia's been going through, everything she's been trying to deal with in the Senate. It also shows us why she is no longer in the Senate when The Force Awakens begins. I think it's a really special skill for Claudia Gray to have been able to write this book where we already know the next step. Like, we already know what happens with Leia because we've already seen Force Awakens. So to be able to write an exciting story in that interim time frame where you're worrying about things, but you also kind of have in the back of your mind like, well, I know she's gonna be okay. I think that takes a lot of skill, and I really enjoyed it. I think this was a really good look inside Leia's head as an adult, and I ended up giving this one 4 stars. So those are all of the books that I read in February. Lots of Star Wars towards the end there. I think I got kind of burnt out on contemporary because I read so much during Contemporary-thon, and now I'm just like, sci-fi, fantasy, give me anything else. Let me know if you read anything that I mentioned, and I will see you guys soon in a new video. Bye!